Today, I will tell you about a refugee. It is not the worst story. It is not a unique story. It is a story of how a 16-year refugee with no English, no family, no friends, end up earning a master's degree at American University. This is my story. I was born and raised in Democratic Republic of Congo. When I turned 16, the country was at war. Many families were randomly targeted as the enemies of the regime. One day, it was my family. To escape the police, I hid on a ship that was docked in my seaport city. I only meant to hide for a couple hours. But that night, the ship sailed. After a month-long journey across the Atlantic, the ship sailed. It docked in New Orleans. Meanwhile, back in Congo, my father and my AO brother were murdered. In the United States, I was a refugee with no papers. And soon after, I was taken into custody and sent into detention in Pennsylvania with the minor children who, like myself, who had arrived in the United States unaccompanied by an adult. I was taken into court, but because I didn't speak any English, I had no idea what was happening. Only years later, I learned that my request for an asylum had been refused. I took classes where I was living in detention center. There was a teacher who couldn't pronounce my name, Kiangana, Dialungana. She told me that I'll be known as a Johnny from then on. Amnesty International exposed the condition that we were living in that place, and the federal government ordered its close. Because I was minor, with no family, no friends, I was sent to a foster care in Philadelphia. The only bright spot of my life during that period were the phone conversation I had with my mother back in Congo. Talking to her kept me hopeful that one day I'll be back home and be with her again. But when I aged out of a foster care, I was sent to an immigrant group home in York, Pennsylvania. While I was living there, I received a devastating news that my mother had died. When she died, I wanted to die too. A social worker, sorry. a social worker contacts a local psychologist, Dr. Elizabeth Revell. Dr. Revell changed my life. The first time I met her, she asked me if my real name was Johnny. I said, no, it was Kyangana. And she said, never to allow anyone to call you Johnny again. At that moment, Dr. Revell changed. He gave me my identity back. As I got to know Dr. Revell and her husband, Dr. Alvin Revell, they saw a light inside of me. They took me in the home and they adopted me. And they became my parents. Adoption made me feel included. The feeling I had not had since fleeing Congo. They provided educational opportunities, and I fell in love with the school. I graduated valedictorian of my high school. As my English improved, they saw my potential and they supported me to continue my education. They encouraged me. I attended York College of Pennsylvania, where I received a bachelor in international relations. And they supported my desire to earn my master's degree. But because I was refused an asylum here in the United States, I was not qualified for grant, student loan, or any financial aid. My mother, Dr. Elizabeth Revell, used her savings and they took out grant loans to pay for my education. My only job was to do well, and I took that job very seriously. I put in extra time, spending my summer and a winter break getting a head start on my books for my upcoming semester. Reading them 3 and 4 times just to understand them. I stay awake at night, studying, reading, and writing papers by sticking my feet inside the bucket, for the ice bucket, just to be awake. The method I highly discourage you to use. It's painful. In grad school, I commute between DC and Pennsylvania, driving 200 miles every 3 weeks, every 3 days or 4 days sometimes, just to save money. My aunts and uncles, Lori and Pat Berry, who lives in California, call me every drive back home just to keep me awake. And last month, I graduated with my master's degree from a School of International Service here at American University. But I owe this much accomplishment to my mother, Dr. Elizabeth Revell. She saw a light inside of me, and she allowed it to shine. My parents believe that wasting a human life is a tragedy. In my country, the Congo, there are 800,000 orphans of war whose lives have been wasted. They have been exploited as child soldiers and sex slaves. The lucky ones live on the streets. Many of them starve. My parents' love and compassion inspired me to create the Marie Mambu Makaya Foundation. I am working now to build an orphanage for these children, to give them what I was given: security, education, and most of all, love, so that their light will also shine. Were you touched by my story? Were you inspired by what Doctors Revell and Arvin, Elizabeth Revell and Arvin did for me? I hope you are. Here's my challenge to you. See each refugee who comes to this country for the promise that they hold. See a light in each one of them. Pay forward what you have been given. Just do what you can. Do a little to help one human being to become who she or he was meant to be. Thank you.